What's up YouTube? Today I want to travel back in time to the days that our parents are always talking about, before you had to take out a loan to get the #1 at McDonald's. The days where you had to worry about your kid getting bullied by some dude in a Letterman jacket. When MJ was still the king of pop, not today's bullshit music like Ice Spice. Who even put spices on ice? I'm talking about the 80s, baby. Let's get into it. So first we have the intro. The intro just consists of 3 synths, a bass, and a riser. First thing I did in this beat is I laid down some synth chords. They sound like this. This consists of 3 different sounds that are layered together. So the first sound is what you just heard. The preset is called Stranger Things from Baby Audio's BA1 synth. This synth I tried to use for most of the song. It's a nice analog synth. I love the sounds in it. So I think I've edited this preset a bit, and then I've added some fresh air just to add some presence to the synth, and then cut out the lows and kind of shelved off some of the low mids. The second sound we have here is from the Jupiter Thriller Brass preset. Also cutting some of the lows and then adding some reverb to this preset. This is what it sounds like. The last layer we have here is also from the Jupiter. It's called the Synth Brass preset. We have some RC20 doing some tube pairing distortion or whatever. I don't know. I like this a lot. I use it a lot. We got some EQ just cutting out some of these mids. Don't ask me why I use Ableton EQ on the others, but Pro Q on this one, I don't really think. I think we got a whole different reverb also. Don't ask me why. Then now we have an actual Ableton EQ down here. And then lastly, another fresh air, just giving it some presence. That sounds like this. Also, we have some processing on the whole synth stack. First, we have a utility kind of bringing down the width. We have a Pro Q on here just shelving some of the lows and bringing up some of the high mids. We have a Soothe 2. This is cutting some of the high frequencies. Cutting those high frequencies helps because when you add presence, sometimes you get some unwanted like ringing frequencies. Then there is a radiator, which is like a type of distortion or saturation. Another fresh air, just bringing some presence to the mid and highs. This is really a life hack. And lastly, a Valhalla room just to add a reverb to the whole stack. So if I mute everything, this is what we have. That's with the effects that are on the synths individually, but not the grouped effects. This is with the grouped effects now. Just makes it sound a lot fuller, has a lot more presence, it's a lot sexier. So for the bass and the intro, I use the BA1 again, and I use the Dark Bass Vibes Gamela preset. Also, I just followed the bass notes of the chords. The last thing we have in the intro is this riser here. This is actually a very common pop trick to do, is you can take a clap or a snare or anything like that. So if I take a clap here and then add some reverb to it, then bounce this track, freeze it, flatten it, turn it into audio, and then take this tail, then you can make a riser with it. So this is the riser I made. I think it's also pitched up 2 semitones. That is layered with this reverse crash cymbal. And one more thing we have in the intro with those risers, we have this kind of, I guess, fill, but kind of introduction to the drums. It sounds like this. So for the drums, they're from the Oliver Pack on Splice. The kick and the snare sound like this, just a 4 on the floor pattern. This is a reverse snare to just on the 4th snare to kind of emphasize it. On the snare, we have a little bit of reverb. On the kick, there's nothing. I think with drums, just picking the right samples is key. Like, I don't like processing drums a ton if I don't have to, so I just try to pick the right samples. If I do anything to my kick, typically I'm just EQing it, trying to get like a more balanced sound, but for this track it just worked how it was. The last thing in the snare is that every 16th snare, or kind of the end of each 8-bar phrase, I have a reverb snare kind of going out to layer with the main snare. With the other snare, it sounds like this. Next, I have 2 hi-hats layered together, one pan slightly to the right and one pan pretty hard left. One pan to the right is louder and kind of the main hi-hat. It sounds like this. It's just a typical 8th note rhythm with volume automation that gives it more of like a human feel to it. Also on this hi-hat, we have a radiator just to kind of give it some more like oomph. And then we also have this hi-hat layered. Both hi-hats together sound like this. Gives it a nice stereo effect on the hi-hats, not keeping them center with the kick and the snare. So for percussion, we have this crash. Has some Ableton reverb on it, don't hate me. Then we have this Lynn tom fill. And that just has a bunch of reverb on it. You can see, like with these drums, I didn't really do too much EQ or anything. Like I think the least amount of effects you have to use on something, the better. I don't like to add a ton of effects to things just because. I think a lot of newer producers kind of feel like they have to add effects or something. And most of the time it's just picking the right samples and knowing when and when not to use certain effects. The more I've gotten into producing, the less effects I use and the less like of the parameters I change. I think it's important to learn all the parameters and the tools and yada yada. I have way too many plugins. You can really get by with just Ableton plugins or just, you know, a FabFilter bundle or something. But I encourage you to experiment, figure out what plugins like work best with your workflow. So here's all the drums in the chorus played together. We also have this impact sound, which is the same exact sound as the riser, but it's not reversed. The last thing I have in the chorus is this ARP, which really gives it the 80s movie feel. So the sound is called Pluck IGAE, and I think I edited this sound a little bit. I really like this synth because it's pretty easy to edit everything. Then I've cut out a lot of the lows because I just really wanted the higher frequencies from this sound. I have an auto pan that gives it some movement. I have this delay, which also gives it a little more movement. And then I have the reverb after the delay, which I think sounds better than delay after reverb. So as we transition into the verse, the only thing we got going on here is I've changed the rhythm of the main chords. I've relaxed the rhythm a bit and given more space for the vocalist and some variation to the rhythm. It sounds like this. I also changed the drum fill and just taken out the other tom here just to add some variation. With the rest of the drums, it sounds like this. We also have the same exact drum pattern going in the verse and the same bass, but I've changed it to follow the bass notes again. This last chord changes a little later than it does in the chorus. Halfway through the verse, I wanted to add some variation, so I added this synth, which also has a halftime on it. So this is also with the Baby Audio synth. The preset is called I Wish I Was an Arpeggio. Then I have some halftime on it with the mix on 60%. That's what's giving it the low notes. Then I have a delay and a reverb, and lastly a EQ cutting the lows. Getting into the bridge, I've cut out the drums, and so it's just synths and bass here, this same transition effect. So the chords are the same as the verse, but I've added this synth lead that sounds like this. So this is also Baby Audio's BA1 synth. The preset for this is Synth Time Cop 1983. I swear this isn't a sponsor. If Baby Audio is watching though, like, hit me up with some plugins, I'll review them. Yeah, so this is the sound, and then I have a delay, a reverb, an EQ cutting the lows. Something I did as well to layer with this sound is I bounced this same synth with some grain delay on it. And just to show you how I did this real quick, if I just copy this same lead, and if I drag a grain delay here, take this little dot and move it to the bottom right corner, or you could also just turn the frequency all the way down and then turn the pitch all the way up. Then you can leave the dry wet on 100%, and that sounds like this. And something I like to do is like anything crazy sounding like that, I like to just bounce it in its own track so that I can edit it as a separate sound. So that's what I did here is I froze it and I bounced it, and then I got this, and then I EQ'd out a lot of the lows and the highs to just add an effect to the main melody, but it not be overbearing. With the melody, it sounds like this. You can hear how it adds just a little bit more sauce on the high end. Then we have the same counter synth from the verse, but this one has the halftime on 100%. All right, so I've showed you all the elements that are in the song. So for the rest of the song, I'm just changing things out. So I'm adding this same counter synth halfway through the second chorus to just add some more to the second chorus. And then I have this post chorus here, which brings in the melody from the bridge, and then at the end bringing all the synths together. The last thing I want to touch on here is just the outro, which just fades out in classic 80s fashion. So I just have a utility automation on the master that's fading out the song. And with that, let's get into the mastering of this beat, because I think it helps make it sound super full, super fresh, and might give you some insight into how I master my beats. On one of my shorts, I was getting a lot of shit because I said if you just put a utility and a saturator on your master, it would sound good. I don't stand by that. It was mainly just for hip-hop beats to get your 808s to cut through more. I don't think you need to master hip-hop or 808s like this ever unless there's already vocals on the track. I think this is overkill for that, but I do like doing this to my pop beats and any other type of beat that I do. So first I have a utility here that's monoing my bass under 80 hertz. Typically, I'll do anywhere between 80 to 120 hertz for bass mono. It's just kind of like depends on how low the bass is. Then I have some ozone going on. So for the equalizer, I actually didn't do anything here. If I'm mastering a song, typically I'll cut around like 28 to 30 like this right here. But since this is a beat, I don't want to do anything too overkill. I have some multiband EQ going on here. Then an imager to kind of widen the higher frequencies and lower the lower frequency and make the lower frequencies a little more mono. And then I have a maximizer. I always use IRC for transient because I don't know how to master and I always turn the stereo independence all the way up. Basically that is mastering the left and right channel separately. And then I find that turning your character down to like 0.25 to 0.7 range is like the best for like loud masters. I don't know, EDM loud masters. So I have that. And then my sauce is adding another maximizer on here. Usually I'll keep the ceiling on this one like -1 or -2, like in between that range. Add another maximizer and do 0.3 decibel ceiling. Always, this is always the ceiling I do for my last maximizer. Same settings, a faster character. I never use transient emphasis. Don't ask me what that means. Yeah, I'm not a mastering engineer, so this is just what I found that sounds good. Hopefully somebody will make it sound better when the artist hops on the beat. But just to show you, I'm going to check this gain match, and then I'm going to bypass the whole plugin so you can hear what it sounds like without the master and then with the master at the same volume. That's what the gain match is doing. Just going to play a section from the post-chorus, which is the most energetic part of the song. So that was bypassed, and now we're going to turn it on. So that is it for this 80s pop beat. I hope you learned something from it. I hope you're making your own 80s fire. If you want to dive deeper into this project, if you have Ableton, if you want to steal some of the sounds in this project, then you can go to Scraps. I'm selling the project file there for $5 just to support me, help me out, and then also you can look at my processing and things in more detail. If you don't have any of the plugins that I showed in the video, don't worry, because those tracks will be frozen, so you'll be able to look at all the other tracks and, you know, steal my drum samples if you want. Last thing I want to promo is I just want to say that I do music production lessons over Zoom. So if you are interested in doing that, please hit my email, which is in the description, and we can get you booked for that. All right, I hope you've liked, I hope you subscribed, I hope you commented, join my Discord. Let's get into the full beat.